regular permissions, and more. Linux is organized by files. Directories are special types of files. Hardware devices are also files. Links are also files as well. In this video, I'll describe owners and permissions for different kinds of Linux files. To review the current ownerships and permissions on a file, I'll do so in my home directory. I run the ls-l command. You'll see the permissions for a file in the left-hand column, these 10 characters here. The user owner is in this column. The group owner is in the column which follows. Now let's go into more detail on the 10 characters in the left column, which is split into 4 categories. The first position in that column determines the file type. If it's a dash, it's a regular file. If it's a D, it's a directory. If it's an L, similar to, or an example is shown here, that's an L, it's a link to the file shown on the right side of the right-hand arrow. If it's a B or a C, it's a block device or a console device, and those are typically found in the dev directory. The next 9 characters are all related to permissions in 3x3 character groups. In other words, the first 3 characters relate to permissions given to the user who owns the file. In this case, user Michael. User Michael is allowed to read, write, or execute this specific file. Next is the group owner. Let's show those 3 characters there. In this case, members of the Michael group, which could include users other than Michael, are allowed to read that file. Finally, everybody else is allowed to read or execute that file. To change the permissions on a file, you can use the chmod command. If you own a file, or your account does, you're allowed to chmod the permissions on that file to whatever you desire. For that purpose, you can use the chmod command with the numeric value of permissions. For example, if you run the chmod 777 abc command, everybody gets read, write, and execute permissions on the ABC file. In contrast, if you run the chmod 660 abc command, only the user owner and members of the group which owns the ABC file are allowed to read and write to that file. Permissions can be changed in other ways as well, but back up a second. The default permissions you see on a file are based on a concept known as the Umask. In this case, 0022. The first 0 is not used. The second 0 means that nothing is blocked, and the user who owns that file is allowed to read and write to that file. The last 22 means that for both the members of the group who own that file and everybody else, they're not allowed to write to that file. And that also means that whenever you create a file, it's not created or does not have execute permissions. So if you create a file, say a good script, and want to make it executable, you have to run the chmod command to give it execute permissions. I could give it execute permissions in this fashion numerically, or as I suggest, I could add execute permissions for the user. There are other things I can do. As suggested here, I could add write permissions for members of the Michael group. I could add read permissions for everyone else. Everyone else meaning others, and then I add the plus sign and give everyone else read permissions. There we go. There's more, some of which we'll cover in other videos. Thanks, and on to the next video.